Welcome to the Public Sector Marketing Show, a podcast for government and public sector marketing professionals who want to level up their digital marketing and social media knowledge, skills, and strategic thinking. And now, welcome your host, Joanne Sweeney.
Hello and welcome to the Public Sector Marketing Show. In this episode, I discuss negativity and trolling on social media. What is your organisation's immediate response when you're faced with a barrage of abuse from the public online? Do you even respond? Fear of public criticism on social media is probably one of the greatest challenges for government and public sector. It also stunts social media growth. In this episode, I'm going to discuss how to deal with negativity and trolling on social media, why you shouldn't build your strategy on the 1%, why the public must be listened to and how you can do it. And I speak to Tony Rino, who has been published in a journal on this very topic. So stay tuned. In this column, I want to ask you a question. Are you building your social media strategy based on the 1%? Now, you need to listen to the end of the show to hear the interview with Tony Rino, who presents this concept really well. But I'll introduce it. His research has found that in the main, 1% of your tribe are going to cause most of the anxiety for you. Now, I'm not dismissing the voice of the public. However, what I am suggesting is that what is the problem with the 1%? Why are they complaining? Are you even listening to what they're saying? What if we understood the 1% more and we actually understood where they were coming from in terms of a complaint, a breakdown in communications, or maybe they want other people to hear them and to start following them? What about the other 99% of your tribe that are engaged, that are perhaps advocating for what you're saying, your policies? How are you serving the 99%? What if the 99% of your following were actually happy, content, even enthused by your social media activity? What if they were encouraging you to give them more? So that's the point. Why do we listen to the 1% and let them direct our strategy when in fact the other 99% may be quite content with what we're giving them? It's very important to differentiate between negativity and trolling on social media. An unhappy citizen who feels unheard definitely needs a response. A troll, an anonymous bot, do not need a response. So if you're not engaged in social listening and you're not looking at the makeup and the source of angst from that 1%, then you are missing a real opportunity for your social media strategy. So let's look ahead to the next 12 months. How are you going to differentiate between negativity and trolling? And how are you going to serve the 99%?
Level up your social media skills by taking our diploma in social media, plus gain an industry qualification. Use the code SOCIALMEDIA20 for a 20% discount.
Visit publicsectormarketingpros.com.
In this consulting segment, I recommend that you activate your FNC strategy. So what is FNC? It's a concept that I introduced in my book, Public Sector Marketing Pro, and it stands for frequent nasty comments. Consider it as the opposite to frequently asked questions. You should be tracking FNCs, not to dissuade the public from having their own voice, but to actually understand where their opinions are, where their thoughts are in terms of policies or new legislation that might be coming into being. An FNC strategy will allow you to have content to respond to the 99%, but guess what? To also the 1%, and let's set aside the trolls and the anonymous bots for a second. People get unhappy when they don't feel heard. They will also go to another website, social network, or influencer to get their information. Also, did you know that when you project negativity online, that will spiral far quicker than positivity? So you've got to grab that negativity with both hands, and you've got to fill the information void with content that is created on the back of the frequent nasty comments that you're picking up from social listening. Social listening is a skill and a talent within the discipline of social media. It allows you to aggregate mass data by using a piece of software. One tool that I frequently use is TalkWalker. So that uses artificial intelligence to create big data right across the social web, on Twitter, on blogs, on forums. And that means that you can track and social listen to keywords relevant to your organization. Hashtags will also let you do that to a certain extent. So if 2021 is going to involve you being more responsive to your tribe online, introducing your team to community management, and a willingness to have that two-way conversation with the public, then make sure you adopt my strategy of FNC, tracking frequent nasty comments, and turn them into content that adds value to the public conversation, but most of all, that answers their questions and their concerns.
A one-stop shop digital marketing and social media resource. Join our membership academy for 12 months. Access a library of how-to videos, template strategies, and organizational policies. Monthly live coaching. Attend webinars with subject matter experts. Meet and network with public sector pros from across the world. Use the code MEMBERSHIP20 for a 20% discount.
Visit publicsectormarketingpros.com.
In this episode, we hear from Tony Rino, a professional in communications, public relations, and digital marketing and social media with over 30 years experience. In 2020, Tony was published in the McMaster Journal of Communication in Canada for his work on how to handle negativity online. His research is absolutely fascinating, and it gives us an insight into what we should be doing about the 1%, and perhaps our focus should be on 99% of our tribe. Tony's research, which I have linked in the blog post associated with this show, is titled Dealing with Negative Social Media Comments: The Giant Bullhorn That Punctures Holes in Organizations' Walls Like an Arrow to the Chest. Watch, listen, and be inspired.
Thank you very much, Joanne, and it's a pleasure to meet you all virtually. And Joanne, thank you too. As I was doing this research, it was wonderful to meet you digitally. I just found a lot of your papers, or articles, and they really resonated with me. And you'll see the sources that I used in my paper. But thank you. It's a pleasure. So we'll get started. So I've taken all the animations out of my slides just to give you a brief overview of who I am. And thanks to everybody for taking the time to introduce yourselves. Along the top are, some of the companies that I've worked for. So I've worked for the city of Calgary. Calgary is a $1 million+ city. So I managed their website in 2008 and actually helped them get into social media. Worked in a lot of oil and gas companies, where I currently work for a Canadian oil and gas major. So I've spent a lot of my time in controversial industries. What's before this is working for Canada's largest residential landlord. So I know a thing or two about customers who get upset or who are angry. I also do some music on the side, so that's some of my CDs that are on iTunes. That's my granddaughter, who you can just stare at on the bottom right. And I'm pursuing a master's degree, as Joanne said. I'm at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, completely online. Mount St. Vincent is like a 3.5-hour time zone away from me, or 3 hours, so quite a distance. But it's been a real journey for me to learn as I go. all of these roles that I've had have been net new. I joined these companies because they needed this thing called a social media community manager or a webmaster back in the day, or somebody who could manage digital. So it's been a really interesting nearly 20 years of working, and I guess probably another 10, who knows, we'll see how long it goes. And so what really influenced me, and I think I heard it in some of your comments, was this influencing power of disproportion. In fact, it influenced me so much that, in those early days of social media, when you had spent so much time on a post and crafted the words and picked the great photos, and you get, 200 likes and 20 really great comments, and then one negative comment. And that's the one that, like, my manager would come to me and say, what are we going to do about that negative comment? And in my head, I'm going to say, wait, what are we going to do about the 200 likes and the 19 positive comments? And this is a repeating scenario for me. And it actually influenced me to pursue a master's degree. In fact, it was when I wrote my letter to get into the school, this was going to be my thesis. Because it was so this sort of influencing power of disproportion, and this image of, we just pay attention to the one thing when there's 99 great things. And so, part of the rationale for me to get into university, to complete my master's at this, older time in my life, was because I developed this knowledge. I wanted to learn more, and I definitely wanted to share more. So you're helping me, and hopefully I'll help you a little bit as well. What I did find, though, as I did some more research, is that this power of disproportion isn't really new. It lives in expressions, in things we say, even in the Bible. There's this disproportion rhetoric or dialogue that happens regularly. And there were some really amazing ones that I found. The match one on the top right really resonates with me. I just chatted about it with my mom again today. That one tree can make 1,000 matches, but one match can burn 1,000 trees. I'd never heard that one before, before I did this research. And I thought, this is really cool. And I remember my dad, I think I mentioned to Joanne, was a union president who said often that he would spend 99% of his time dealing with 1% of the membership who were causing problems. So it's not new, but I needed to contextualize it for myself and for my managers in social media, or when we were dealing with social media, that is, to really understand it, and to help me get some sleep, so that I didn't lay awake worried about this one negative comment that always happens, but also to help my managers through it. So as I researched the paper, and I was encouraged by one of my profs to say, no, you can do something else for your master's. So this was one of the classes that I did. So it's an 8,000 word paper if you want to get through it. And I'll hit some of the highlights today, and share with you some of the studies and sources that I really, really liked, including Joanne, by the way, who, guess what, you're in her class. So I cited two of her papers, or two of her articles. One of them is in the title of my essay, and you'll see later on here that we mention it. So I'll walk you through 5 parts here to say that we're going to talk a little bit about perspective, as I have. Talk a little bit about categorization, just to understand emotional intelligence and your users, and further about your introspection. That's what you're saying to mitigate social media negativity. And also a really key piece, I think, on moderation, dealing with profanity and hate speech. And then finally, I'll give you just a bit of a checklist. But I do want to stress that this isn't a rigid flowchart thing that I'm going to present to you today. It's very ambiguous, and it's more art, not science. And hopefully will provide you some perspective, just to realize, as you know, that quote below, that negative emotions are such a powerful force. And in fact, they can deter organizations from participating online as they did for the company that I currently work for. So I've been working for them for 3 years, major oil and gas player with retail stations, across the country. They didn't want to get into social media until 2018. So because they couldn't deal with these negative comments. So sometimes there's a rationale behind it. It's just a fascinating topic to me. So let's start with the perspective. And I'm going to give you two sides to the perspective. There's a quantitative side and a qualitative side. Some of you may have heard of Pareto's 80-20 rule, or just the 80-20 rule. So it's an interesting rule. It doesn't necessarily add up to 100. It could be 95. It could be 60-10. But the point is that there's some disproportion. And as Pareto said, it's the small number of factors that can explain most phenomenon, just like that pie chart that I showed you at the beginning. And it was interesting to read about this and then dig into some social media examples of this. And what I found was an article that talked about Wikipedia contributors back in 2015. And what it found was that if you could moderate and control a small portion of the negative commenters, you would basically take care of a large portion of the negative comments. So interesting that if you're a social media community manager and do things regularly and start seeing negative comments, you might see the same people. They're not necessarily trolls, they're just angry customers. And so if you can deal with those people, you've dealt with the majority of your problem. So that's the quantitative side. The qualitative side is also fascinating, and it's this psychology known as negativity bias. So the point of this is that the rate of negativity actually grows at a steeper rate than the rate of positivity. We just look at things with a negative bias. And there was a really cool study that backed this up, and forgive the slides too, because there's a lot of APA and academic formatting in it, because after all, it's an academic paper. But the interesting study that I found here that really resonated with me was this one by Waddell and Sunder. And what they did was they set up remotely. There were lots of people watching the same TV show, and they were commenting on this TV show as they were watching. And what they found was that as soon as someone added a negative comment, immediately everybody else said, oh yeah, her hair is gross, or oh yeah, it's ugly, or yeah, that part of it I didn't like. So it seemed to affect people's enjoyment of the program just based on watching people's comments that were negative, and it created this kind of avalanche effect. So these two pieces were like really important to me to understand, because just like you, like I just want to connect with my audience. It's frustrating when you see this this negativity that comes up, and sure, I can now understand it from a qualitative and quantitative point of view, but honestly, I just want to make a difference, right? And so there's me getting upset. So what do we do about it? Well, I went back through my career as well, and we're looking at this view in non-build view. I'll give you the slides full on so that you can see what's going on. And I'll just walk you through how I've kind of categorized over the years. So I started my social media career back in 2008, actually a little earlier, when I followed my son on Facebook just to see what he was up to in 2005 or 6, and got a little bit addicted to the thing. But I got paid to be a social media person in 2008. And I was working for an oil and gas association in Canada. And the negative comments were overwhelming. And the only way we could deal with it was, a process. There were just too many. We didn't really post too much on social media, but it didn't matter because we weren't part of the conversation at all. And so we had to deal with these comments. And I turned to this on the left, this amazing Air Force blog assessment. It wasn't called social media back then. But it's a flow chart. You'll see a copy of it in my paper that you can read after. And it's still kind of valid. And it just walks you through, and I explain it a bit in the paper as well. But this was like, to me, I worship this thing, because even back in 2008, people said social media is a battlefield, and that we're scared. Corporations are scared witless about being in social media, and so you needed this thing just to process and figure out how you were going to comment, if you were going to comment, and most of the time you didn't. And so it was very organization focused in terms of, how you dealt with comments, but it evolved to say, you know what, we're just spending so much time trying to categorize this stuff that we're not paying attention to the users, right? And the users have valid things to say, and why do they say what they say? And so there were a number of studies early on. This one's from about 2015, but if you know how academics work and you read this paper, the researcher here was probably talking about stuff from 2012. But this researcher had 3 categories. So you start to understand how users think and why users do what they do. And Joanne, I'll mention you here in a little bit as well, because this is an ongoing piece of research. Just trying to figure out your users. What do they want to do? And in this study, they said, they want to be involved in the development of the internet. They want to share some information, and they want to belong to an online community, right? Some pretty aspirational things, not necessarily negative, but an interesting start to what it was. But it's moved into a different piece. And this is one of my favorite readings. I'm going to recommend 2 readings. Well, Joanne, I'm going to recommend yours, of course. But there's 2 other readings that I'm going to recommend here today. And this one by an author named Harry Yalonen. He created this study in 2014, but he's created a number of them since. This one really resonates with me because what he said was that organizations need to develop this online emotional intelligence, really understand your users and recognize those emotions, as I say, to understand the meaning of your business and to behave based on that understanding. So you have to get to know who your users are, understand their negativity, and adapt. Don't fight it, right? I mean, try to understand where they're coming from. And so he has these 6 challenges of acting with emotional intelligence, and you can see the top 5 ones. The 6th one is really interesting because it breaks out into 4, and is kind of harkens back to that last one I showed you, where it says people want a solution. The negative users want to be compensated. Probably they'd like to help others or prevent it from happening again. But that's not necessarily an altruistic approach. That's just them wanting to kind of vent. They also, in quotes, want to help the companies so that this doesn't happen again and the issue is resolved. Or they're just a troll, and they just want to get you upset. But I think this is a really interesting categorization, and again, important for you to understand your users and say, okay, you know what, there's some demographics here. That's what's causing them, some demographic considerations. That could be causing the concerns. Something cultural, is this on a rant site? There's this amazing site that we're actually watching here called thelayoff.com. It's pretty ugly looking. Very simple, just a Google search, and whoever created the site has adapted a discussion board around it. So you can search for a company, and I believe it's worldwide. And what it does is it allows people to post layoff rumors about companies on it anonymously. And so, wow, it's a total rant site. It goes into all kinds of tangents. So when you're seeing comments like that on a rant site from anonymous users, should you be as concerned? Probably not, because it seems to balance out. So it is a consideration. And then also the social media platforms, and going backwards a little bit here, but the social media platforms are also a consideration as well. If you've got a ranter on LinkedIn, is that different than a ranter on Facebook or Instagram? all of these are considerations for you. And the fifth one, I think I chatted a little bit about it in the qualitative research, is called the avalanche effect. So it's just recognizing that sometimes things are going to get really hot and heavy, and do you want to step in and try and stop an avalanche at the time? It might not be a good idea. You might want to wait a little bit to let things blow over a little. So this is a really important study, I think, in categorizing. But it continues, and Joanne, here you go. It continues in understanding user negativity. And so I didn't know Joanne at all before I did the research. I was looking at academics, and I was like, okay, I want to verify this with real world people. So congratulations, Joanne, and thank you. So here's something from one of Joanne's articles, again, to categorize people, to say, here's what some customers are doing. They want everyone to know, they're kind of, beating their chests and saying, I had a bad experience, you should see this. And sometimes they're just really frustrated and seeking customer support. Maybe they've tried to phone and haven't gotten through, so they're going to go through on Twitter. And then there's the people who just want to spark a negative reaction, right? They just want to be mean and be a troll. And that's something that you have to recognize and be aware of. And so what I thought of, okay, so how do we stop this? And this gets into the next category in my paper, which is introspection. So one of the ways to mitigate it, not necessarily stop it, is to look at your tone and voice. This is the other study that I highly recommend by a group of people led by a fellow named Barcelos. And he rightly points out that brands are tempted, to use this informal style on social media. And to be honest, many of you work in government, right? Is that really the style that you use when you talk to people face to face, when you're dealing with clients or customers or stakeholders? And yet social media has this attraction to want to be very informal. And what Barcelos is saying is that that negative emotions can increase because of this. Like, people aren't making the connection. And so what he did was he had this categorization to help you understand who you are. And then this, to me, is awesome, right? It's saying, okay, where do you fall as a business, as an organization? Are your services hedonic, or are they utilitarian? Kind of academic words, sorry, but hedonic being like, a travel agency, a massage place, a coffee place, a bookstore, right? So those are kind of feely kind of places. Or are you utilitarians? Or are you a government, business to business? Are you a funeral home? Are you an accounting service? So you can see right away that I hope you can see that you would speak very differently depending on where you sit on that scale. And so his point was, you need to understand where you are, because using the wrong voice will incite negative social media comments from your customers. He said it was either or in his study. I kind of feel like there's a scale, and I kind of feel like, for the company I work for, we do a couple of different things, and I feel like one of them is more utilitarian and the other one has some customer touch points. So I feel like it's a little bit more hedonic. But I think it's really important to look at this. And what he did in his study that was really cool was he did I think something we all want to do would be to have a test of our products or services. So he created many actually, and these are two that I'm highlighting. He created these examples of a hotel and a pizza place. And he made one version that was hedonic and one version that was utilitarian. And it's more than just first person, third person voice. It's, informal versus formal. And he put these out to a group, a survey, in a qualitative survey, to get their opinions of it. And I could probably spend an hour talking to you about this particular study. I just encourage you to take a look at it because it was really fascinating. I don't think you, as people with social media experience, would be very surprised by the results. You'd say, yep, this makes sense. It verifies what I believe. But my takeaway from it was, why am I trying to fight this? Here's a study that proves, that if you're on this side of the spectrum, this is how you should talk. Don't talk too informally because it will incite negativity. And so there you go. I'm moving along, and I'm going to have an example of that in a little bit. But the next piece, and I do want to leave time for questions for us. The next realization for me was around content moderation, around profanity and hate speech. Facebook, I know that you've probably all managed a Facebook page. Hopefully, you've all gone into the settings and set up a profanity filter to automatically, filter it out. Hate speech is a lot more difficult. And I have two examples of this. So what Salim, the author here, is saying is that this negativity can be so overwhelming. Again, it can frighten people from being online, and people just love to be negative, right? And the two examples I have about profanity, though, are cautions. So the first one was somebody who left a note on our Facebook page that said, I lost my wallet at your station, and now I'm effed. Of course, he didn't say effed. I'm just saying that for us. And so the profanity filter automatically blocked that, right? So as a social media community manager, if I had not gone in and looked for that, that comment and seen that it was blocked, the poor guy would have been without his wallet. So we got in touch with him. Fortunately, one of our customer people had found the wallet, put it aside, and we resolved the issue. But I wouldn't have seen it, if I just decided, profanity, I'm going to block it all. I'm not going to pay any attention to it. So it's a caution. I still use it and still watch it, partly for entertainment value, but mostly just to make sure that I'm not filtering out the bad folks. Hate speech, though, is such a different. It's ambiguous. It can be so subtle and so nuanced. And so the example here was somebody who started off with a similar. I can't remember if it was a wallet. They lost something at one of the service stations that I work for, and it started off. Their comment started off as a decent enough comment, and said, I lost this thing, and I went back and I couldn't find it, but I probably will never find it because brown people run this station. Well, as soon as I read that, I don't care about whatever it is this person lost. So it was definitely block the comment or hide the comment, and I banned the user. I don't want to get into a conversation with somebody about that on my page. I don't want other people to get into a conversation about that. It's a good thing I saw it before anybody else did. So you need to set up these rules with yourself, with your page, and I have them listed out, as community rules on my page, just to deal with this. And in fact, profanity and hate speech are so important. And so it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an obligation, I think, for social media community managers to moderate profanity and hate speech. And there are some great readings. Third at the podium for you to read is Gillespie, the bottom page here, very recent, who just slams Facebook in his articles. And I'll jump right down to his quote. He just basically says, anybody can create a website nowadays and allow users to comment openly. But if you're not moderating, your website's going to become a cesspool of negative comments. It's a cold reality of commenting and our world of community involvement. And further up, in this other article by Salim, it's filtering keywords is what you've got to do, but you also have to be aware of those nuances, even misspellings. If you get into a lot of this, as I have, you start to see what the trolls are doing, because some of them are very smart, and they'll space out letters, or they'll flip letters around, and so you add those versions into your keywords to block them. So very important. Moderation, very important. So a couple of examples for you, and I'm getting closer to the end of the presentation, so I'll take some of your questions here in a bit as well. So here's a couple of case studies for you, actually this one's kind of marketing related, and the next one's kind of communications related. So here's an example of where tone and voice didn't quite work out. So this is a company I worked for. We celebrate Groundhog Day here in Canada, because you've seen the movie, obviously, probably. Groundhog Day is that point right in the middle of winter. It's the day that is right between winter and spring. And the legend has it that if the groundhog sees his shadow, spring's going to be coming early. The weather will be better. I think it's just an excuse, as you saw in the movie, to have a party and drink a lot. But anyway, it's a lot of fun every year, and it's a milestone for us. What this company did, though, on February 2nd, because it's Groundhog Day, and because they felt the need to say something on social media, and because I would argue they are a utilitarian company, they created this hedonic sounding post that, guess what, incited some negative comments. So remember when I said companies are sort of teased into wanting to speak informally? So their post says, what did the groundhog say this morning? He said, stop wasting energy, turn down your thermostat at night, save on your electricity, smart groundhog, with the veiled sort of goal of getting you to buy your energy through this company. So what happened was, and this is just a snapshot of some of the negative comments, right away it was like, doesn't matter, said this guy, whatever we do, you're going to charge us an arm and a leg. And then the little avalanche of negativity began. And to ATCO Energy's credit, they did step into the comments, but they changed their tone. They went from this, Mr. Groundhog, what did he do this morning, to a very utilitarian tone. So they went back to the formal corporate voice that they probably should have had in the first place, to say, this stuff is kind of out of our control. It's regulated by the government, blah, 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 right? So they got themselves into a bit of a pickle. And it's a subtle example. And sometimes negativity is subtle, but you can see how this could have escalated and gotten worse. So utilitarian organizations just need to be careful of their own tone and voice. So this was a marketing example. This next one was more of a communications example. And oddly enough, both of these examples are with calendar events. The last one was Groundhog Day. This one is International Women's Day. I'll give you a bit of context around this. There's an international company, you may have heard of them, called FNC Strategy, an engineering firm. What happened back in March of 2019 was that this company had received very lucrative government contracts and were actually called out and found guilty of receiving these contracts in a not so appropriate manner. It was later found out that some of the money that this company received was used by executives for prostitution, for gambling, for some not so nice things. So here's a company that's got a pretty gross spotlight on them, right in the thick of International Women's Day. And they decide to put a post on their Facebook page that says, today is International Women's Day. Look out for inspirational stories from the incredible women across our business. And this is a video of, I presume, women who work for the company. And the video is kind of like, if you can imagine a runway modeling kind of scenario. 5 or 6 ladies who are walking towards the camera and holding their arms and looking very proud. And good on them for promoting International Women's Day, but probably not a good time given what's happening in the news and the headlines even that day around the company and prostitution. So guess what happened with the comments? Your love of Canadian prostitutes is noted, says one comment. They're an inspiration to your code of conduct. For goodness sakes, like, who's running this Facebook page? And why didn't you have the understanding of what's happening in the media or the emotional intelligence to say to yourself, this probably isn't the best time to run this story? Maybe your staff is beaten up by the media. Then play the story. My argument would be that's your intranet story. It's not a publicly shared story. And so you dig in a little bit more to this, and as community managers, I know we're savvy about this stuff, but you look at this example, and you can see that it says 3 comments, 2 shares, 413 views, 14 likes. Of the 3 comments, though, and I've got the all comments section selected, there's only 1 comment shown. And so what happens is somebody's moderated these comments. So somebody actually took out 2 other comments. Facebook will show a savvy user will know that somebody's moderating this post. So somebody filtered out 2 comments. Why they chose to keep this one is kind of beyond me. But you can see that it's hard work. Moderation isn't easy. But think about it before you even put out a post. And both of these companies, I think, were attracted to this calendar day. Like, I don't know what today is. It might be International Hamburger Day or something. Does your company really need to post on International Hamburger Day? If you can make a valid business reason, you can stand in front of your CEO and say, we sell hamburgers, we should do it. That's kind of my approach, is that, before I do any of these calendar day posts, because I don't want to be lulled into this sense that I should be talking informally on social media just to make noise, right? So kind of 2 fascinating examples for you. Just going to end quickly with this mitigation checklist, what we talked about. So the perspective is really important to me, and being able to share that perspective, qualitative and quantitative, with your superiors and with yourself, and just to understand it, that negativity happens. Being able to understand your audience, so your users, and developing this emotional intelligence, and just learning from your users. And part and parcel with that is that introspection, understanding your voice and what the best time is for your audience to create content so that you don't, invite this negativity. And moderation is a super key. And if you still go through this, you might still have to use this crazy flow chart of comments. And I think there's several of them available on the internet now that have adapted based on this sort of blog assessment chart. And just remember, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So really think about what it is that you're posting and how it might or might not incite negativity.
To access the resources mentioned in today's show, go to publicsectormarketingpros.com/podcast and make sure to share this episode with a public sector pro you know. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Public Sector Marketing Show. This episode has ended, but your digital journey can continue. Head over to publicsectormarketingpros.com to access resources and links mentioned in today's show and to connect with Joanne and her team. Until the next time, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform.